Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And on our panel here, the new Conservative Justice Secretary, David Lidington, Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth, the newly elected leader of the SNP in the House of Commons, Ian Blackford, the Daily Mail columnist, Peter Oborne, and the businesswoman who took the government to court over Brexit, Gina Miller. Thank you very much. And from home, of course, you have Twitter, Facebook. You can use hashtag BBCQT, or you can text us. The number is 83981. And if you push the red button, you can see what others are saying. Let's have our first question tonight, which comes from Daniel Winston, please. Daniel Winston.
Given that major policies from the Conservative manifesto were missing from the Queen's speech, is it time for Theresa May to finally admit that she does not have a mandate to govern?
David Lidington.
The one-word answer is no, and if you look at the outcome of the general election, while we did not get the overall majority that we had hoped for, and that clearly has consequences for the legislation that we're able to take through Parliament and means that we have to look for ways in which to work with other parties on issues where there's common ground, then the Conservative Party remains over 50 seats ahead of the Labour Party, and if you add Labour, Lib Dem, Nationalist MPs together, there are still fewer MPs than there are Conservatives. I think we have a responsibility to get on and govern, and in the circumstances the electorate has given us, and if you look at the programme, the legislation and the non-legislative initiatives that have been announced on sorting out Brexit in a way that protects the interests of all parts of this country and gives us a stable statute book the day that we leave. If you look at the measures on the economy, boost to technical education, taking forward the biggest infrastructure programme that we've had in more than a century, measures on social justice, on domestic violence, on mental health, good stuff there.
The questions about all the things that dropped out. People went to the polls and all the things they may have voted for have vanished.
Yeah, but if you can only take legislation through, David, if you have the majority that is assured to do it. You have to live with the cards the electorate has given you.
The man there in the man there in the striped T-shirt. Yeah, you.
I think that after a vanity referendum and a vanity election, I think that what we have is a crisis of legitimacy.
Okay, Jonathan Ashworth. His words, a crisis of legitimacy.
Yes, I think that's a very good description. And to answer Daniel's question directly, yes, we have possibly the thinnest Queen's speech for over 100 years and the weakest and most unstable government for probably 60 years. And when you look at the big challenges facing the country, yes, we have the challenge of Brexit, though we start those negotiations in the weakest possible position. We have an NHS in crisis, with waiting lists close to 4 million and parts of it being sold off and privatised. We have a child poverty crisis, with child poverty likely to hit 5 million in this Parliament. On the economy, we have wages stagnating, we have 0 hours contracts, insecure work and people turning to food banks, and as we have seen in recent days, in very tragic circumstances, stark inequalities in housing provision. And there were no answers in this Queen's speech to any of those issues.
Sorry.
And this, and if I may say so, let me just finish my point. And the driving force of this government now is their own political survival, not the interests of the British people. And they may well...
So what do you want her to do?
What
do you want her to do?
I want her to reverse the austerity cuts to public services.
No,
I want her to reverse the cuts to the schools, which will be... I want her to reverse the cuts... I want her to reverse the cuts to the National Health Service. I want her to reverse the cuts to social care.
Where is your magic money tree? You know... By the way, the Kirby's piece of Mr. Ashworth and his colleagues to sit on the opposition benches, given they thought they won this election. They actually were hammered in the election. They were 2 million votes worse off than the Tories. And now they won't.
Peter, we are in Plymouth, where we took a seat off the Tories. Peter, when Theresa May went to the country, she thought she was going to get a landslide victory. She was putting the party interest first. The country rejected her. She has not got a majority in Parliament.
But even by your own wretched and pathetic logic, if the country rejected her, they certainly rejected you. And
you, sir, in the middle. Man in the fourth row, you, sir.
How can we trust Theresa May to deliver Brexit when she can barely deliver a deal with the DUP?
Ian Blackburn.
You know, the hubris from this Prime Minister is astonishing. Really the contempt I think she's had for Parliament and for the electorate. Saying that she was going into this election expecting a landslide, my goodness, she's been given a bloody nose. And perhaps you can actually take some lessons from us up in Scotland. We in the SNP, we've won the last 3 Scottish elections, and we've actually just won this election for Scotland as well, returning 35 MPs. Look, you know, there are 2 major issues that we're facing. One is Brexit. And I think it's absolutely crystal clear from the election result that we had 2 weeks ago. There is no longer a majority for a hard Brexit. We have to have humility from the Prime Minister. She needs to reach an accommodation with all the people in this country. Now, we accept that the United Kingdom voted to leave the EU, but we also need to have a recognition from the Prime Minister that Scotland, Northern Ireland and London didn't. And it's important that what we have is respect across all the government institutions in this country. The Prime Minister promised us that we would have the views of the Scottish Government and others taken into account. That hasn't happened. There has to be a meeting of the Joint Ministerial Committee, and we need to make sure, as many have argued for, that the administrations in Belfast, in Cardiff and Edinburgh are represented.
Do you think you can hold up the process? Is that your idea?
Well, what we have said is that we are willing to compromise. We published a document last December recognising the position that the UK is in, but saying quite clearly that we cannot be dragged out the single market against our wishes. There are 80,000 jobs in Scotland, many, many more throughout the UK that would be imperilled.
What do you mean by you're willing to compromise,
Brexit.
though?
Well, because
you're not in a position to demand a compromise, are you?
You
don't have a majority. You can't put a majority in the House of Commons together.
Well, we don't have a majority in the House of Commons, but the point is the government in London doesn't have a majority, and the government's going to have to listen. Even if you look at the Queen's speech, it talks about this, about building a consensus across the devolved nations. So we're willing to do that, but we need to make sure that the devolved administrations will be there. We now know that the government's going to have to come to the Scottish Parliament, Scottish Government, and get a consent motion through. So the government have now got to extend that hand of friendship to allow us to make sure that we can protect the interests of the Scottish people and the Scottish economy, and by extension, they'll do a job for the people in the rest of the United Kingdom. But lastly, also, it's about austerity, because austerity must end. There's 9 billion of additional cuts coming in this Parliament, and we need to make sure there's an alternative to those cuts which are not working.
Gina Miller.
I find it extraordinary that the arguing and the name-calling that goes on amongst politicians. Do you not appreciate where we are? The severity of where we are. Brexit has fractured everything we took for granted as our society. And we need to be very, very realistic about where we are. And that's why I'm very worried, because what the Queen's speech showed is the government is not doing its day job. It's not looking after, as somebody mentioned, NHS or education. It's not doing things. It's obsessing with Brexit because they have no idea how they're going to do it in the time, how they're going to get the legislation through. And to have said there isn't going to be a Queen's speech next year is just a travesty of democracy, to say that they're going to just, wave that away. But when it comes to the question on DUP, there's something that that people just seem to have missed about this negotiations on DUP. If the DUP gets this hard-headed negotiated 2.5 billion, 2 billion, 2.5 billion that they're asking for, the Barnett formula says that the other devolved powers are going to have their share too. That's about 3 billion for Wales, about 8 or 9 billion for Scotland. So we in the UK are suddenly going to have to foot that bill, the taxpayers of the UK. Those are 10 very expensive seats. It's pure and utter nonsense.
I think it is important.
Peter, I'll come to you. Let me just go around it. Let me go to one or two members of the audience, and then I'll come back. I'll come back to you, David Livingston. The man there with the you, sir. Yeah.
I'd just like to follow on from Gina Miller. The irony that we're in a United Kingdom and we are not, we are far from united. Surely we should be looking at a cross-party alliance. Every single person is voted, every single person is affected by Brexit. I am Tory, however, I do not believe that Tories should be running a Brexit campaign. Everyone should be.
And you, sir, in the check shirt there, yes.
Isn't it the case that Theresa May would already be long gone if the video of her saying to a police officer, "Stop scaremongering, stop crying wolf," a Manchester police officer warning her, pleading with her to reconsider the cuts, the massive cuts she made to policing as Home Secretary, she would be long gone. The media have failed this country terribly in not showing this to the public before the election.
Excuse me, I don't... talking about a cross-party alliance to put through Brexit, of course you are right, but I think I would say something to the Remainers and to people like Gina, to be honest, and probably to quite a lot of the mainstream press, that there was a vote this time last year, 12 months ago, where the majority of the British people voted for Brexit.
Peter,
we then had a general election.
Nobody's arguing with that.
We then had a general election where 83% of the country supported Brexit parties. I say to the Remainers, yes, come on board, let's do a constructive Brexit, don't try and queer it and wreck it.
Nobody's
That's what you're doing.
Actually, I ensure that there is a legal Brexit, because if you'd had your way, what we would have is an illegal Brexit where a Prime Minister was putting herself above what? Parliamentary sovereignty, which is the thing that you were all banging on the table about.
No, I would have no objections with parliamentary sovereignty. That's why we did Brexit.
No, sorry, I was going to the man next to you. I'll come to you as well. Yeah.
Theresa May got a million more votes than Labour, so I don't know, where's that million other voices coming from then?
OK. And the one beside you.
In the referendum, 3 million EU citizens who are affected from it were not asked, and people abroad, UK citizens, were not asked what their opinion is. So the majority was made up of that and lies, and still there is no way that people understand what it means to leave.
Very good point. And it's an absolute disgrace that we're now a year on from the European referendum, and I've had European citizens coming to my surgery in tears because they don't know if their rights are going to be respected. That should absolutely shame us all. This government could have made a decision to say that those European citizens here, our families, our friends, our colleagues, they're here, they're staying, and their rights will be respected.
Well, we did make just that offer last year, and while some of our colleagues in Europe were willing to accept that and talk about it, the view amongst others was that until Article 50 had been triggered, that they could not get involved in that sort of negotiation.
We should show leadership.
And I think,
we created this. Europe didn't. It's the United Kingdom that's coming out.
You're right
we should
about
take
that,
leadership
and that
because
is
it's about people. And
we're
saying to these people, your future is safe in this country. You're our neighbours, our friends. The threat of deportation that many of them see is absolutely abhorrent.
But hang on a second. But Theresa May has apparently today guaranteed the rights.
Yes.
Though, of course, what that guarantee consists of, we don't know, but has guaranteed the rights of EU citizens who are resident here.
I mean, can I just, David,
is that so?
That is so, yes.
That's not been announced in Parliament, and if she's going to treat this country with respect, an announcement of that kind has to be made in Parliament, and there should be a vote to accept that.
Well, that is what she is doing is explaining the offer in the context of the negotiations to her fellow heads of government at their meeting in Brussels, so that they understand exactly.
So why was it not an amendment in the Article 50 bill?
Because while we had made an offer to sort this issue out ahead of triggering Article 50, the response from our European colleagues was that until that treaty process had begun, we couldn't do so. And let me just respond, if I may, Dave. It's one of the points being made about the referendum.
It's not in the Queen's speech.
I was hammering on doors and handing out leaflets, campaigning very hard for a Remain vote. I was deeply disappointed by the result. But I know, had it been 52-48 the other way round, I'd have been squaring up to those of my colleagues in Parliament who had campaigned to leave and say, look, sorry, chaps, I know it's not what you wanted, but you have to accept the public verdict. And I think if we're somehow to say, let's set aside how people had voted, then that would
don't shout out. Don't shout out. I'll bring a microphone to you and you can say your bit. But if you keep shouting out, nobody can hear you.
If we simply tried to
wait a second.
If we simply tried to set aside how people had voted, then that would do profound damage to public confidence, the democratic process.
Hang on a second. I want to go on with Brexit. Hang on. I just want to hear this man here, because he's been shouting out. You might as well say what he's got to say.
Thank you, David. It's somewhat unedifying to see all these politicians and one non-politician who represents the 1%. There's all a common consensus here, and you're all dodging the actual question. The millions of people watching television here tonight are screaming and shouting probably at their television screens because you are all studiously avoiding the question. The question was, has Theresa May's government got any legitimacy after losing their majority? All the pundits, all the academics, all the commentariats and all the politicians, the career politicians, gathered around this panel here tonight, guaranteed that Theresa May's gamble would pay off, that she would come back with a majority of 100 seats, 120 seats, that Corbyn would be buried under a landslide.
All right. What's your view?
Jeremy Corbyn has proven that anti-austerity policies are popular. That's the question.
OK. Now, hang on a second.
Tories and the Blairites lost that election.
OK. Thank you. We were talking about Brexit, and we've got a Brexit question I'd like to take, and then we'll go back to maybe to Corbyn and the election afterwards. But let's have this one from Jeanette Blewett, because it's where we'd got to. Jeanette Blewett.
1 year on from the EU referendum, are we any wiser on what Brexit really means?
You've all been talking about Brexit. Are we any wiser? Gina Miller.
No, we're not. It's still the back of an envelope proposition. We still haven't seen any details, and that's what worries me. And all this Remain, Leave debate, it's got to move on. Everyone has to move on, because it's not about going back. It's about what happens next.
Well, where do you move on to? Where do you want us to move on to?
This is a problem. We need to see the details. We need to see the direction of travel. What are the options? And there is nothing. There is rhetoric. It is empty and means nothing.
I'm not clear what you're asking for. Do you have a view of what you think Brexit should be like? Or are
I think we should be going forward.
Or are you saying that the Prime Minister should say, or David Davis should say, this is what I want to achieve?
It should be quite clearly a cross-party delegation committee, however you want to call it, who goes forward for the best possible deal that they can get. If they cannot get the best possible deal, which gets us into somewhere which isn't similar economically, socially, from all, defence point of view, all those sorts of different facets, and it's not achievable in the 2 years, then to my mind, the first thing that should happen is a transitional period should be talked about, because it cannot be done in 12 months. It cannot be done in 12 months. You cannot undo 43 years in 12 months. And the reason I say 12 months is because it won't start till after the German elections, and it needs, as we know, a ratification period of about 6 months. So it's just impossible. Let's start talking about reality here.
OK. I will come to you. The woman there, yes, you.
You're a businesswoman. Do you go into the board telling everybody what you're going to do and how it's going to happen? No, you keep it close to your chest and you tell it as much as you need. The country don't need to know it all yet. When she's got what she needs, she can let us know.
Well, can I answer the question? Sorry, I didn't get your name. What's your name? Wendy.
Yes.
Wendy, actually, when I do a negotiation strategy, I have to prepare very detailed cost-benefit analysis of why I'm actually going down that strategy and I have to balance. Sorry? No. But when you go into a negotiation period, when you go into a negotiation, you have to have a position. You don't go in with nothing.
And those that need to know, no. Why should you need to know?
No, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the country.
No. You're talking about you as well. You don't need to know. None of us need to know yet exactly what's on the table.
You should want to know what's going on.
Because we know we want to get out of it, and that's the most important thing.
We understand that. We want to know what it's going to look like.
How can she tell you until she's gone to the table and put it on the table to find out?
All right. Well, let's hear from David Lidington on that particular point. Does the Prime Minister, does David Davis know what he wants? And would you then tell us if you think
yes,
he does?
We know what we want, and we've set out the objectives of the negotiation in public already. Those include sorting out on a reciprocal basis the continuing rights of EU citizens here and our own citizens in other European countries. It includes an ambitious third country trade and cooperation agreement with the EU so that we maintain as free trade as possible in those circumstances, that we have arrangements that allow us to continue cooperating with the 27 who will remain, very close neighbours, friends and allies of us.
You'll be worrying
on
her.
Crime.
David, you'll be worrying her because she doesn't want you to reveal all this.
No, this is laid out. This is laid out in public as an objective. Between the cooperation on crime, policing, security. What we are not going to do is to publish a long, detailed analysis of our negotiating position. What we say, if the European Union says this to us, we will respond in that way. Nobody in business, nobody in politics, if they're sane, does that and reveal their hand to the other side.
Jonathan Ashworth, Jonathan Ashworth, do you agree that the government is behaving properly and doing the right things on this?
I'm afraid we're not very clear about what the government's position is. And to be frank, look, I accept that the country voted for Brexit. I obviously campaigned and voted for Remain, but the country's made a decision. And I accept that, and we have to move forward and get the best possible deal that puts jobs and prosperity first here in the United Kingdom. But to be frank, I wouldn't trust Theresa May to negotiate her way out of a paper bag. She can't. She still hasn't negotiated a deal with 10 DUP MPs. How on earth are you going to negotiate a deal with 27 other European nations? And David Davis, in the general election campaign, went on one of your rival TV shows and said we're going to have the summer of all rows with the EU over the timetable. He's just caved in this week on the negotiation timetable. They have not going to put the British interest first. She has lost her mandate. She has lost all authority. They know that, and she cannot negotiate a deal that puts
point out a boring fact. Even without the DUP, the Conservatives have a 3 majority over everybody else. Because the Cheddars won't turn up. They have a majority. Minority governments, there's a long history of minority governments.
Utterly unstable, as you know.
No, the 76 to 70...
Anyway, what's your point,
That's a great
Peter?
model, the 76 to 79 government.
What's your point?
Well, I'm just saying that Theresa May does not just have legitimacy, she has a constitutional duty to form a government as the largest minority party. She also has a majority, an effective majority over all other parties put together, even without the DUP. And we mustn't get too excited about this. This government, I'm afraid, it's a great disappointment to you, I know, and could easily last a very long time.
OK, but the question was, yes, you said what does Brexit mean? Yes.
We don't know what it's going to look like, and of course we need to know. Like, we need to be able to plan our lives. Businesses need to be able to plan their future strategies after Brexit, and we have no idea. And the EU published its negotiating guidelines ages ago. So we know what their standpoint is, but we don't know what ours is. How is that feasible for people to plan their lives around this?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. There has to be a plan. This is not a government with a plan. This is a shambles. When we had the Article 50 debate in the last Parliament, one of the things that we pushed for in the Scottish National Party was to have a so-called reset clause, which would have been a fantastic opportunity for the government, because if the government comes back with no deal, it means we reset the whole process, that there's an alternative to crashing out of the EU and coming off that cliff edge. And unfortunately, the Conservatives and Labour would not vote for that opportunity that would have given, I think, some protection for people right throughout the United Kingdom. You know, people talk about the fact that the UK voted to come out. Yes, of course, the UK did. But we were told in our referendum in 2014 in Scotland that if we voted to stay within the UK, that our rights to remain within Europe would be protected. Where is the respect to the people of Scotland and Northern Ireland that voted to remain? What the government has to do is to recognise there is not that majority for a hard Brexit.
All right.
They have got to build compromise across the people and the nations of the United Kingdom that respect the differences that exist and allow us together to put forward a deal that will be one that will be to the advantage of all nations of this country.
Okay. There are a lot of hands up, and I'll come to you in just a second. But David Lidington, we've had voices in Europe now. Donald Tusk saying today that he was keeping the door open for the UK staying in the EU. And the Dutch Prime Minister saying he hates Brexit from every angle and hopes the UK opts for some form of continued membership. What is the government's attitude to people in Europe saying, hey, you don't have to go, you can...
that whatever view those of us in government took in the referendum, and there were people who are ardent partisans on both sides in the referendum, that decision has been taken.
But you must love Donald Tusk and Mark Rutte.
What I'd say to Donald and to Mark Rutte and to the others, you know, many of these are people I used to see a lot when I was Europe Minister, is, right, we want to maintain a close, friendly partnership. We want to have what the PM's termed a deep and special partnership with the 27 countries of the European Union, because there are many challenges we face in common. There are many things on which we can cooperate together, even with us being outside membership of the European Union. So let's try and build that new partnership of cooperation with those neighbouring countries and approach this in a constructive fashion, but respecting the democratic decision that the people of the United Kingdom are entitled to take.
OK, let's actually hear some... Thank you.
I work for a local manufacturer who exports around the world. Now, we do a lot to Europe, some to the rest of the world. The rest of the world is a really, really tough place to do business with. Yeah. We've done it, we've tried it, and yes, we do it, but Europe, so much closer, geographically, culturally. If they could have something to reassure business, something like they could say, yes, we're going to stay, in the single market, something like that.
Do you expect to get anything like that?
I mean, certainly we're saying in the customs union, would be really reassuring, I think, to businesses who are exporting.
Well, David talks about wanting free trade with Europe, and I agree with him. But the answer to that is the single market. It's very easy.
OK, you sir, in the purple shirt there.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's just go around a few more people.
Yeah, two or three things. I think in terms of the need to know about what the Brexit plans are, I think actually the general elections show we do need to know. If you want my vote, if you want my trust, I need to know what I may or may not be voting for. And I think in the absence of that knowledge, people didn't vote for the Conservative Party that were, frankly, full of lies, illusions, deceit and uncertainty. I think in terms of the referendum, the one thing we know about that is, yes, OK, one side won, but it was marginal. It couldn't get much more marginal. So the only logical conclusion is the most marginal Brexit imaginable that would do its best to unite both sides into some kind of tolerable exit.
Okay. And the woman up there in the second row from the back. I'll get to you and then the person beside you, if you like.
Thank you.
Yes,
yes, I think some people, though, are getting a little bit fed up with hearing about Brexit. All the talk. It's negotiations, it's talk. We want some action. We want to know hard and fast, what does it mean? And like we say, a year on, everyone's still talking. And some of us, quite frankly, you hear Brexit and you start switching off. I need action on Brexit. Let's then move on and look at society and look at all the things that also need looking at, education, NHS, etc. Let's get Brexit sorted and move on.
And the woman next to you?
Yes, I'd like to say, if Europe wanted us to stay in, why didn't they give David Cameron a better deal when he went across and tried to...
Yes, all right, you waving, and then I'll go to Mandy back. Yes.
The lady makes a very good point. We didn't know what Brexit was going to mean when we voted for it in the referendum. It was lies were printed in papers like the Daily Mail, and people voted. So we have a responsibility to the British people to give them a referendum when we know the facts.
What were the lies in the Daily Mail?
350 million to the NHS per week. Devon Hospital see none of that.
Absolutely not. The Mail is extremely accurate and fair paper. And it may not like it, but it's read, it's read by an awful lot of people, honourable, decent people, including, I imagine, a lot of you in this audience. It's a great newspaper. It doesn't tell lies.
To be fair to the Mail, I think it was actually Boris Johnson and Michael Gove who promised us 350 million a week for the NHS. And I bet you something, we won't see a penny piece of that extra money for the NHS.
And the man in the very back row, about 8 down, you say yes.
I would just like to say that the answer to the reason why people don't actually know that many details about what's happening with Brexit is because it's completely unprecedented. Like, we literally are going into unprecedented waters. We're not going to know what's going to happen on the other side. And secondly, can all the parties just kind of come to a consensus? Because you all fundamentally want the same things. Like, it's really
I'd like to answer the lady in the blue at the top right, who made such an interesting point about Brexit getting in the way of other things. What I'd say is this. The reason we voted for independence for Britain is that we wanted a democracy where we make our decisions about how we govern ourselves. We can't govern ourselves until we got Brexit, because democratic decisions can't be made by politicians in Britain until we have Brexit. At the moment, they're made by commissioners and foreign powers.
OK, now look, we began with a question about whether Theresa May has to admit she doesn't have a mandate. So what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, so to speak. And let's take a question, please, from Daniel Bulmer. Daniel Bulmer.
Why won't Jeremy Corbyn accept that he lost the general election?
And citing in evidence John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, saying, I don't think they have the right to govern. They've junked the manifesto, calling for 1 million people on the streets of London to ensure another election comes as soon as possible. Why can't you accept you were defeated?
Well, we do accept the election result.
No, he
You know,
doesn't.
we do accept it. We accept the fact that the Tories thought they were going to get a landslide victory and they're in minority government, and we accept the fact... We accept that... It's not, I'm afraid, sir, it's not irrelevant, because we now have a weak minority government. And we were told in that general election campaign that she needed a big mandate, that she needed a substantial majority in order to get the best deal for Brexit. She was sent back to the House of Commons as a failure, as the leader of a minority government. And the issue now is this. The issue now is this. We have a government who may well be in authority, but effectively have got no power. They have had to junk their plans to snatch away the winter fuel allowance. They have had to junk their plans for grammar schools. They have had to junk their plans for the dementia tax. Why? Because they know they can't get it through the House of Commons.
Do they have a right to govern?
Because they cannot get a deal with the DUP.
Do they have a right to govern?
They've got the right to form the government.
But that's what your Chancellor, who's senior
formed,
to you in the Shadow Cabinet, says they don't have the right to govern.
We're all equals in the Shadow Cabinet.
Oh, are we? Oh, are we?
We have. Of course
we really?
We most certainly are.
Oh, well, that's
We most certainly are.
So you can disagree with each other and general chaos can ensue, and it's
The
OK.
only chaos is on the Tory side, David, not on our side.
All right, hang on a second.
This is more examples of the name-calling and things. And the realism is that, as we're sitting here this evening, the EU27 are sitting having a dinner at which Mrs May will talk, then she will leave, and then they will carve up what they take from us. They will be debating the European Medical Association. They will be debating who gets the European Clearing House, EBA. They're already doing that. So this whole idea of what's going on here and what we're going to be negotiating, actually, we're negotiating with 27 member states, and we've got to be realistic about that. And that's why I think a lot of this, what's being said, has got to be more honest.
All right, well, hang on, but we're talking about domestic politics just for a moment. You, sir.
I'd just like to come back to the point he said about the means testing, or he mentioned about the winter fuel payments. Well, it's going to be means tested. What that means is that rich people should not be able to get the winter fuel payments. Now, that money that's saved from that can then go into social care, because social care needs extra money.
But, sir, it's not.
And the negativity about
Brexit
is shocking. It's an opportunity for Britain to succeed in the world.
The point is that policy is not going to happen. Because they can't get it through.
All right, I want to try and go to people who haven't spoken. Man in spectacles there, in the middle. Yes, you.
I just think the whole Brexit thing is a good example of the fact that party politics is failing. And what we need to go back to is what Parliament was built for and intended for, which is people like me, who was independent candidate, who stood in Plymouth. And that's what we need, because people are putting their parties first before people. And that's the problem.
OK, and you sit in front, in the green, yes.
I'm not a Daily Mail reader, but I have read Animal Farm, and wasn't it your... And wasn't it George Orwell who wrote that some are more equal than others? But my main point is that, sadly, I think we could do with a lot more humility from the panel. The fact is that, with respect to Ian for the SNP, congratulations on your appointment, but you lost 24 out of 56 seats. That's a pretty dramatic result. And I certainly agree that the Conservative campaign was from the textbook how not to run an election, but nevertheless, Labour did finish 56 seats behind. So to pretend that that's a win is just absolute nonsense.
Okay. Right. I think we might go on because we're over halfway through the programme. No,
I haven't had an opportunity to address this question, if I may, because it's
which question?
The question about whether Corbyn lost the election.
Oh, all right, we can do that.
Because I think the important thing is that this is a parliament of minorities, but we went into this election with a Conservative majority government. They have lost that majority. Now, I actually think there's an opportunity that will come out of this, because I do not believe that there is support across the United Kingdom for austerity. And I would say to Jonathan, and I would say to others, and I would say to some friends, even on the Conservative benches, where there are things which are patently wrong, that we have to tackle them. And I think one of the reasons that the Conservatives lost that majority support was the attack on the elderly. And one of the biggest injustices is the one that's faced by many women that were born in the 1950s, that have seen an increase in their pension ability, which is increasing by 6 years over a very short period. And some of these women were only given 14 months written notice. That's a disgrace. And that's one thing where I want to see a cross-party consensus that women born in the 1950s get what is rightly theirs.
What we're saying now, it was very interesting. Take note. We should, in this audience, something very frightening is happening. We've got SNP, and if we had another general election, SNP might well end up in bed with Labour. Both of them are against what is called, they call austerity. I call it living within our means. We're still got. I think somehow and so they have no idea about economics, how to run a country, or how to balance the books.
Well, I tell you what I did. I know the NHS is on its knees and we've had a winter crisis. I know the schools are being cut back. I know child poverty is going to rise to 5 million. I know that disabled people are having their benefits cut. That's what austerity is, and that's why we're opposing it.
All right, but wait a minute. We'll try and keep to the question that Daniel Bulmer asked, if you don't mind, which was why won't Labour accept the result of the election? And I haven't called on David Lidington. Let David Lidington answer it.
Can I start by just saying this about Jeremy Corbyn? I mean, I probably disagree with him on practically everything, and I believe the policies that he champions would bring ruin to the country. But I do think that actually all political parties perhaps need to take note of the fact that his campaign was able to touch a chord with a lot of people who felt sort of alienated from the political process. And I think, gentlemen there talked about humility, and I think, we do need to approach the result with humility. Probably, certainly we do, and all, I think, political parties do. And I think we have to play the cards the electorate has dealt us. That does not take away some of the very big challenges. The gentleman over there talked about social care. We have an ageing society, more people living to a great age. We have to find ways in which to continue to put more resources into social care in a way which...
Sorry, look, you've spoken once. Don't shout out, please. Because he has just to go on for longer if you shout out.
In a way which...
So you might as well keep quiet and let him hear what he has to say. I know you have your views. You're one person in an audience of 150. I don't want you taking over this programme. He's speaking. Let him speak.
We have to find a way of getting extra resource into social care which is fair between the generations, because you cannot simply add to the taxes all the time of younger people who are in work but who are a shrinking proportion of the... I'm going to say... And the corporation tax yield has gone shooting up since the government reduced the rates of corporation tax, providing more money for the National Health Service, schools, social care and the other public services. So please show better financial literacy.
Gina Miller.
One of the things I'm very concerned about is this whole idea about balancing the books and Brexit and who pays the price at the end of it. Because I can see we're leaving problems, we're piling it up for the next generations, because actually the national debt, the Tories have not balanced the books, because our debt has gone from 1 trillion to 1.7 trillion.
But the question was about, sorry, you're getting off the point. The question was about, I mean, you may have forgotten this because it's some time ago. The question is about why won't Jeremy Corbyn accept the result of the election? Do you think Labour is not accepting the result of the election?
Sorry, I thought we'd gone on to the other. But
no, we're trying to get back to the point, if we can.
No. We have, I'm sorry, we live in a democratic process where the Conservatives won. They didn't win by a landslide, so it was a hung parliament. I'm not a Conservative, so I didn't lose anything. So, excuse me. There is a hung parliament which is constitutionally allowed in this country. Even if there is no deal with the DUP, the government can operate because they won. The Conservative government won. But they have to... Do we want more instability in this country? The rest of the world...
Now, hang on.
No, we
Listen,
don't.
I think you ought to leave, you know, because... Okay.
Can I just quickly finish?
Yes, you finish your point.
I want to just quickly finish. The point is that we know that the math does not work with Labour and all the other parties coming together. I think I am not a Conservative voter, but I think we need some type of stability in our country. We need to let the government see if they can carry this forward. We don't know if they can. The first hurdle will be whether they can get the vote on the Queen's speech next week. If they do not, and it will be the first time since 1924 that a Queen's speech has not been voted on and gotten through. That's how fragile our constitutional landscape is. That's how fragile our political landscape is. We have to be sensible about this. We have to let the government try.
All right, thank you. So I think we'll go on to I can see you're keen to speak, but we'll go on to we've got another question, and we're 40 minutes through the programme. Just before we go to it, we're in Hastings next week. If you didn't feel you had your shout here, you can...
Probably heard in Hastings.
Yes, and we're in Burton-upon-Trent the week after that. So Hastings, then Burton. Now the details of how to get to the audience or be in the audience are on the screen there, and I'll give them again at the end. But let's take this question from Chris Wilcox, please. Chris Wilcox.
Is austerity responsible for the deaths of the Grenfell residents?
Is austerity responsible for the deaths of the Grenfell residents? And there's a context here in Plymouth for this, because it's been confirmed today that 3 of the tower blocks in Plymouth are among the 7 in the UK that have so far been revealed as having similar cladding to the Grenfell Tower. But the question is, I suppose, springs from Labour's point about this. If you deny local authorities, Jeremy Corbyn said this, the funding they need, there's a price to be paid. Ian Blackford, is austerity responsible?
I think firstly it's important that we pay our respects to those that have really suffered in the terrible, terrible scenes that we saw last week. I think all of us woke up to see the scenes of that building on fire and the horror and the terror that people must have gone through. And it's something that I think has deeply affected everyone throughout the country, and I think we are also aware of the tremendous efforts of the emergency services that did what they could. I am delighted that there will be a public inquiry, and it's important that those that lived in the Grenfell Tower get the answers that they deserve, because first and foremost it should be about the people there, and there has to be an absolute determination by all of us across party that this must never happen again.
But to what extent do you think, from what has come out already, that austerity and cuts in the funding of local councils across the country under both Labour and Conservative administrations
why I would say
has led to people cutting corners.
I will extend the hand of friendship to David and others and say we have to have a reasoned debate about austerity. And we have to look, for example, at what we've done with quantitative easing, where we've poured £435 billion into quantitative easing. At the time, we've said that we haven't got money for fiscal initiatives. We have a responsibility to make sure, as a society, we look after all our people. And when you develop a culture, as we have done, that costs have got to be cut, we've ended up in a situation of the kind of choices that have been made of the types of materials that have been used. Now, all of us are going to share the view that we must learn lessons from that. And yes, I think the political culture that has developed, and also I think that we have not valued social housing in the United Kingdom the way that we should have done. We need to have a balance to our housing policy, and we need to recognise that for people living in social housing, that they deserve to have the best circumstances, the best building materials, just exactly as we would have in any private estates as well.
Peter Owen.
Yeah, first of all, it's very important to say that we don't know the answer. It's very important not to. No, the government has called, rightly, a full inquiry. We mustn't jump to conclusions or make sweeping statements after a day or two, as I think some have in this. It's such a serious issue, and it's so clearly the case that these tower blocks must all, without exception, be made safe. Paradoxically, at the moment it looks, but it's completely as if the spending money actually made the tower blocks more dangerous, because this cladding was added and it's flammable. And without the old system whereby each flat was protected from each other one, seems to have somehow been broken down. But that said, I do think there is an issue about the kind of society we live in. I think there is something metaphor about Kensington and Chelsea, even though there's no evidence that it couldn't have happened at Newnham or any other Labour borough as well. And I look at what Kensington and Chelsea boasting about how low their rates are in a borough where so many people are very, very rich, and I do worry that there's something wrong about that.
Okay. The man there in the white shirt, you sir. Yeah.
The building regulations have not been changed for 20 years by successive governments. Theresa May should order a ban on using any type of cladding until the public inquiry concludes.
Okay, but the question is about, yes, you, the woman there in the centre, the third row from the back. Yes.
Okay, I'd like to correct his facts.
Whose facts?
Mr. O'Born's facts. The cladding that was put on was flammable, and it was £2 less a unit than the fire-resistant stuff. The price to put the fire-resistant cladding on would have been £5,000 for the entire building, and you're telling me that this is not because of austerity, that we don't know the answer? I'm absolutely flabbergasted, sir.
That wasn't his answer. That wasn't his answer. His answer was the cladding was the flammable cause why the flames jumped from flat to flat. That was his
And it would
answer.
take him £2 more to put the fire-resistant cladding on, and that austerity council decided to put the cheaper stuff on.
That's not under debate. That's what people realise.
Can I say something? That we're not all cladding experts or building experts, but there were no fire extinguishers, we do know that, in the flats, and there's no sprinkling system. Now, one of the things I'm more concerned about is we're looking at all the other tower blocks. But what about all the other public buildings, like schools and places we go to work and everywhere else? Does this mean there should actually be a review of all public buildings? Because if you look at it, some of the new schools actually don't have any sprinkling systems because it's not required.
David Lidington, is there an issue of austerity across...
Well, I think first thing I want to say is agree with Ian. Actually, whatever our politics here, I think any words are frankly inadequate to describe what the families have gone through. And I think that all parties, we've all been in government at various times in the last 25 years, we all need to do a bit of soul-searching about this. And Peter did touch on an important point, because one of the things that strikes me is that the local community in North Ken clearly feels utterly mistrustful of and alienated from public authorities and officialdom of all types. And that does say to me that as a country, again, I hope this could be a sort of cross-party view, we have to do something to heal that division. These people are as much part of our country and as entitled to the rights and responsibilities of citizens of this country as any of us on the panel or any of us here in the audience. And now, in terms of attributing blame, I'd say one sort of technical point and then talk more generally about it. And the technical point is that it is already contrary to existing regulations to have combustible cladding on any high-rise. And I think Camden Council, Labour Council, has already said this evening that they are taking legal advice, having found that combustible cladding is allegedly on at least one of their tower blocks. There is a fire service investigation underway to diagnose precisely the cause of this fire and what the various contributory factors were. There is a criminal investigation going on, and I'm going to be very careful in what I say because I don't want to use any language that might, if a person or a company was subsequently charged with a criminal offence, could prejudice a trial in court, which is what might happen. The inquiry will be led by a judge appointed by the Lord Chief Justice with full powers to call for witnesses, for documentary evidence. And I think it is the inquiry, the various inquiries, investigations I've described that will give us the answers. I've already said combustible cladding in a high-rise is contrary to existing rules. And we need to let the experts examine the evidence, and then we should act swiftly on the findings of those investigations.
Jonathan Ashley. Austerity was the question, as the man pointed out.
Indeed, like all on the panel, our thoughts have to be with those who have lost their lives, who have lost loved ones, and for those who now will need all the help that can possibly be provided to rebuild their lives. It'll probably take many months, if not years. And I too want to join with Ian in paying tribute to the extraordinary efforts of the emergency services. And haven't our emergency services been tested on so many times in recent weeks, and haven't they done us proud? Look, we need an inquiry. It does appear, according to reports, that the council chose this cheaper cladding. We need to understand what the legalities of it are, and we need to know why the local authorities came to that decision. On the point about austerity, there is an issue here, because many local authorities across the country have not been able to, but are now quite rightly wanting to, retrofit sprinklers, want to change cladding on buildings. And one of the things I want to say to you, David, in all sincerity, is please, as a government, give local authorities the money to fit those sprinklers now. They need it.
Okay, all right. We've got 3 or 4 minutes left. Terry Portman, let's just have your question to end with. Terry Portman.
If the DUP get an extra £2 billion for Northern Ireland for their 10 MPs to support the government, can Devon and Cornwall expect £4 billion for our 20 MPs to support the government?
Peter Oborn.
I don't think that the £2 billion is the right sum of money to give the DUP. You cannot allow yourself to bribe MPs for support.
And why shouldn't... But if they do get it, should Devon and Cornwall get... Should everybody get a bit
actually,
more?
you're setting out an excellent reason why the government, why the Tory party should not do a deal with the DUP. Because the SNP, they'll be after more money next, and so will everybody else.
But they'll get a deposit for
Yeah, exactly.
Devon and Cornwall won't.
The Barnacle formula
You want
is
to be
there.
in on the... You want Devon and Cornwall to be treated as a special case like Northern Ireland. Do you want independence?
Maybe we'd get a railway here and your people would arrive on time.
You want to be treated like Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland and get a special...
We're all going to grow money trees.
All right. David Liddington, you've got a minute.
Right.
Or less.
Devon and Cornwall, particularly Plymouth and Cornwall, actually too many people fail to realise are pretty poor, in the material sense, parts of this country. So we do need to make sure... Which is why spending has gone up. I could point to the increases that the local health service is getting here, to the money that's been set aside to try and provide much-needed improvements to transport links. But you will only be able to distribute money if it has been created by businesses and a free enterprise economy that thrives in the first place.
So how's the DUP going to get the extra money?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what is going to come out of those talks.
Well, she thinks the DUP are getting the money.
Well, I think let's see what comes out of those negotiations.
Ian Blackford, I have to whiz round fast.
What we have to do is to create confidence that people want to invest. And one of the things that we have said is austerity must end. We've asked for an extra 118 billion to be invested over this Parliament. And by the way, that would balance the books. We've got to recognise the situation that wages are growing lower than inflation. There's a real pressure on living standards. We need to invest in our communities in Plymouth, in Cornwall, in Scotland, in Wales and Northern Ireland. Give some people hope of a better future.
Okay. Gina Miller.
The magic money tree is an interesting one because I have to say, even independent sources have said that both manifestos were not costed in any realistic way. And all of this promising of money, where is it going to come from at a time when our economy now is on the... We are now the lowest of all the EU member states when they looked at our economy growth this year. I mean, you know, we are endangering our country. The police, all the austerity cuts when it comes to our first response services are being damaged at a time when we need to feel safe.
It's usury. It's not austerity, it's usury.
It's not... OK, the man there, we've only got 60 seconds left. Quickly, you'll have to be quick, I'm sorry.
There's been quantitative easing, 70 billion in August. That's a magic money tree. Who does it feed? The banks.
OK.
We can raise money for infrastructure, for what's important. We can also tax those who are paying less tax comparatively to, you know, support the whole of the community.
Jonathan Ashworth, very brief, if you would. OK, everybody, let him just have a quick word.
I don't begrudge the people of Northern Ireland getting an extra £1 billion to invest in their National Health Service. Yeah. But if they're going to get extra investment in National Health Service, the English National Health Service needs to get extra investment and not cut back as it is at the moment.
OK. I'm afraid our time is pretty well up. I'm sorry. Thank you. We only get an hour, you know.
I've been getting away with it all my